What's up guys, Alex here. In today's video we're going to talk about a really controversial topic that's really been buzzing around the news feeds and social media recently, and that's the topic of immigration. We're going to talk about, is immigration a good thing? Is it a bad thing? What are the pros? What are the cons? And at the end of this video I will give you my opinion of what I think about immigration. Alright, let's get into it. So if this is your first time joining us here on this channel, my name is Alex and I am originally from Honolulu, Hawaii, and I myself am an immigrant and I came to Canada about 10 years ago. So right off the bat, you would obviously think that I will be pro-immigration. Well, I'll get to that a little bit later in the video. But first I want to take a look at the positive effects of immigration. So according to a report taken out of Service Canada back in 2021, immigrants bring skills, innovation, and entrepreneur spirit that can help drive economic growth and competitiveness. Studies have shown that immigrants tend to be highly educated, skilled, and they often start their own businesses, create jobs, and generate revenue. For example, a report by the Conference Board of Canada in 2016 estimated that increasing immigration level to 1% of the population by 2030 could boost country's GDP by $2.5 billion. Please keep that number $2.5 billion in your head because it will be important a little bit later. A second opinion taken from the Service Canada was that culture diversity. Immigration can help to increase culture diversity and bring new ideals and perspective to a country. This could lead to a more tolerant and inclusive society, which could benefit everyone. I wholeheartedly believe this part right here. If you are new here, you might not have known that I actually lived in Japan for about 20 years. And if you've never been to Japan, Japan is a very homogenized society where about 98+% of the people there are ethnically Japanese. And Japan has been going through a really bad economic crisis for the last 30+ years. For example, if you right now in 2023, as I'm making this video, what is it, April something? I don't know the exact date, but April, I think 13th today, 2023, the current minimum wage in Tokyo, Japan, which would be equivalent to like New York City or maybe Toronto, their minimum wage is about 830 yen per hour, or for US dollars, that's about maybe $6.80 per hour. In Canada, it's about maybe close to $8 an hour. In a city like Tokyo, $8 an hour. And it is really going through some rough times. And a big reason for this is when you have a society that's so skewed in one direction, again, 98+% Japanese ethnic, the new ideals are not as forthcoming. So when you look at a country like America that's very diverse, you get ideas coming from Europe, ideas coming from Asia, from South America, from Africa. You have all these different ideals kind of emerging and amalgamating together, and you get a really great society because you have ideals building on ideals, building on ideals. And working in Japan, particularly I worked in the government sector in Japan, ideals are not very forthcoming. Normally Japan, an individual that's in power, a subordinate individual, would never contradict or say that the person in power is wrong. So you have very little innovation, you have very little new ideals that are brewing up because the people on the bottom are afraid to speak up. And when everyone thinks the same, you don't have new ideals because everyone's thinking the same. And a good example of this, take a look at my video talking about the hydrogen vehicle that Toyota, or was it Nissan, was trying to build. Everyone is going towards EV, electric vehicles, but Japan is going towards hydrogen, which, if you're not familiar with hydrogen vehicles, are super expensive to store the actual hydrogen, and actually building the infrastructure to get that going is not probably the smartest thing because everyone is going this direction and you're going the complete opposite direction. It seemed like somebody in their camp would have said, hey, maybe we can do this or do this, but because this is not what should be done right now. The point is, when you have a very single-minded, single entity thinking group of people, you don't have innovation. So I do completely agree with this, that culture diversity will build a great society. Another interesting argument that was taken from the Service Canada is that immigration helps address aging population.
Boomer population, which for so long made up the largest quotient of Canadians, now represents less than a quarter of the population, and that the number of people age 85 and up will triple by the year 2046. When we look at other data, it shows that millennials are expected to outnumber baby boomers in just 7 years. By the end of the decade, by 2029, there will be more millennials than baby boomers.
So by looking at this report by Service Canada, it actually makes it pretty clear that this report was taken from 2020, and it shows that individuals between the ages 60 to 100 years old represent about 23.6% of the population. Now, keep in mind that according to Statistics Canada as well, that the average male in Canada life expectancy is about 73 to 74 years old, and women are a little bit more, about 74 to 76. So if 23% of the population will pass away in the next 10 or 15 years, that's a big problem. So when you think about that, if 23% of the individuals are going to pass away in the next 10 or 15 years, we really have to start looking at getting new people into the country to actually help with our social system. According to another report taken out of Service Canada, that between the years of 2017 to 2021, the government actually allocated, hold on for it, $30 billion to immigrate new individuals to the country. Now you got to think, okay, from 2017 to 2021, that $30 billion, how many people actually came into the country? Let's take a look at that. So 2017, we had 286,479 new immigrants. 2018, we had 321,040 new immigrants. 2019, we had 313,580. 2020, we had 184,370 new immigrants, and in 2021 we had 209,915 new immigrants, which calculates to about 1.2, 1.3 million new immigrants between the years of 2017 and 2021. Again, $30+ billion were actually set in place for these new immigrants to come into this country. Now you got to think to yourself, okay, those immigrants that came into the country, are they all refugees? Are we paying for all of these people? No. And let me explain. There are 5 streams that you're actually allowed to come into the country. And what I mean by streams are 5 different programs that you can actually immigrate to Canada. The first and the most prevalent is international student. And I myself came here to Canada to complete my master's degree. And let me tell you, the things that are required to get a student visa are heavy. For my master's, I paid about $75,000 to $80,000, which had to be paid prior to getting a student visa. Also, I had to show in my bank account that I had enough money to sustain myself for the entire time of my study. I wasn't able to get a lot of the government type assistance that most Canadian citizens or permanent residents are offered because I am an international student. There are some benefits that are available to international students, but the big thing is you have to prove prior to coming to this country you don't need those assistance because you have enough money to support yourself. So more than 23 to 24% of these immigrants are actually students that are bringing a large amount of money that is adding to the economy. The second stream is the landed immigrants. And what this is very highly skilled individuals coming to Canada, maybe in the STEM, like engineers or doctors or lawyers or pilots or something that's very high in demand, where you have few of those individuals who are actually here in Canada. And with that stream as well, you have to prove you have employment, you have sufficient funds to sustain yourself in Canada, and you're not a drain on the Canadian resource system. So again, those individuals are actually bringing money into Canada, and they represent about maybe 20% of the individuals. Now the next stream, the third stream, is a working visa. again. When I got my working visa, I had to prove I had a job, 100%. I needed a contract from that employer stating how much money that I earn monthly or annually, however you want to do it. And I also had to give bank records to show that I had sufficient funds in my account to make sure I could sustain myself where I am not a drain on the Canadian government. So those three right there, which makes up over 60%, are not a strain on the Canadian government. The fourth one is claimant refugees. Now, these are the immigrants who are illegal in America and they just walk across the border, throw their hands up and say, hey, I'm illegal. Can I have claimant refugee status? And those individuals receive no assistance from the Canadian government. The children can't go to school. They don't have any health benefits. They don't have any unemployment insurance. They have absolutely nothing. Whatever they have when they cross that border in their hand, in their suitcase, in their backpack, that is all they have. And the entire time they're in Canada, until their case is heard by the Canadian government, that's all they have. They get nothing. And once the Canadian government looks at their case and says, okay, your refugee status is okay, then they're able to get some type of assistance. But in the beginning, they get absolutely nothing. The fifth stream is the refugees. Now, these are the individuals coming from Syria, Afghanistan, Iraq, Iran, normally the countries that are seeing some type of war conflict. And there's actually another one, which is the Ukraine, and I'll talk about that in a minute, but actually, I'll start with that first. The Ukrainian individuals who come here, and I worked in an NPO which assisted immigrants, 100% assisted immigrants. Let me tell you, Ukraine, they don't even call them refugees. They receive like a working visa. The Ukrainian individuals here in Canada get nothing. The government doesn't give them any kind of assistance. And a lot of the Ukrainians that I work with when they arrived at Canada, some of them would get off the plane, go check in a hotel that they paid for, the taxi that they paid for, get into a hotel, and the very next day start working at Costco or start working at Tim Hortons. They start working right away. The government does not. They give them an ability to come here in Canada and work, but the Ukrainians get no assistance as far as financially from the government. The individuals that do, and the fifth stream, is the refugees. These refugees would receive approximately, according to Service Canada, about $165 million out of that $30 billion. So that means $28.5 billion the refugees were not actually getting in their hand. This money was going towards new government employees, new government buildings, new government cars, government transportation fees. This money was sitting back somewhere in some government office being used by some political party. The vast majority of the money was not being given to refugees. A lot of individuals think refugees are getting all this money and they're taking money from taxpayers. They're not getting that much money. I would love to hear what you guys are thinking. Put your comments down in the section below. But after hearing all this information, what do you guys think? Do you think immigration is a good thing? Do you think immigration is a bad thing? Well, for me personally, 100% without a doubt, I think immigration is a good thing. Like I said before, if you look at countries like America or Europe, you have innovation, you have a lot of growth. When you have diversity, you have new ideals. The country will only benefit from immigration. The problem that we're having here in Canada is that the government is not forward thinking. You're immigrating a mass amount of people, and actually I just saw a report by IRCC, Immigration, Refugee, Citizenship Canada, that they're looking to immigrate another 1.5 million people by second quarter of 2024. So what they're doing is they're bringing a lot of individuals into the country without forward thinking and actually thinking what resources are actually needed for these new immigrants in regards to housing, medical, school, doctors, nurses. They're not putting the infrastructure in place to actually assist these individuals. So once these immigrants arrive here in Canada, it feels like they're a strain on our resources, where actually the government should have had the resources set in place prior to them actually bringing all these individuals in. So it's not the immigrants' problem. It's not the immigrants' fault that things seem a little bit wackadoo. It's that the government is not forward thinking, and the government is not actually putting in the infrastructure that would help these individuals succeed. So my opinion, immigration, good thing. Government needs to think a little bit more before they just start to have these droves of individuals come into the country without the necessary support in place. All right, guys, till the next time, aloha.